Okay, so I said today is new series launch day, which is a made-up term. But we're launching a brand new series today called God Can Make a Way. It's one of the most powerful things to learn about God, that when we face something that looks like it's going to be impossible, there's no way around it, over it, through it, God, for him, nothing is impossible. Today, we're going to talk all about fear. Hello. And that may be just what you need to hear today. So I'm going to be speaking, so over to me. Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us today. And let me start off with a question. What are you afraid of? Now, public speaking shows up on the lists pretty consistently, so maybe that's you. Bees, are they on your list? Or could it be your mother-in-law? If it is, probably keep that one to yourself. Recently, I discovered that my wife has birds on the list of things she's afraid of. Well, not like birds in general. Actually, I'm specifically talking about birds inside our house. So here's the deal. Just 1 week ago, we were relaxing Friday after work. It was a nice sea breeze, so we opened up the sliding doors to our living area, let that breeze in. And soon after, we discovered that the breeze wasn't the only thing that we had given the opportunity to let in by opening the sliding doors, because out of nowhere, a bird entered our living area. So what do you do when a bird enters your living area? And this bird didn't just fly straight back out of the sliding doors. It went to every window and tried to, birds don't understand glass. And so it's just trying to fly out, and it kept hitting the windows, pooping down the walls. So look, I grabbed a broom and just gently tried to coax the bird back towards the sliding doors. Louisa, my wife, she grabbed a cobweb broom and she starts waving that thing around like Darth Vader and a lightsaber. And well, look, eventually the good news is that the bird left through one of the exits. But look, people, fear is a real thing. Louisa seemingly has a fear of birds in the house, probably justified. And I now have a new fear unlocked, and that's the fear of being clocked by a cobweb broom. But look, we're going to talk about fear today. Now, before we kind of get deep into what I want to talk about today, it's reasonable to recognize that fear can be a positive. If you're walking down a dark alleyway late at night and something or somebody kind of appears and starts freaking you out, well, then fear, it's a positive thing, because it will hopefully elicit a fight or flight response. But fear becomes problematic with a third response, which is freeze. We encounter fear, it can be fight, flight, or freeze. And freeze is problematic because freeze, by definition, paralyzes us, and ultimately paralyzes us from moving forward into the things God's called us to do. Fear, when it causes us to freeze, really prevents us from having joy and experiencing the best in every day, because we get preoccupied with focusing on what might happen. So the big idea today is that faith can allow you to take control of your fears before fears take control of you. So we're launching a brand new series today. It's called God Can Make a Way. And over these next few weeks, we're going to look at the reality that even when we face what seems impossible, for God, nothing's impossible. Even when we can't see a way through or a way around or a way over something that's kind of preventing us from moving forward, God can make a way. In fact, God can make a way where there isn't a way. So let's get into it. How about you scan this flow code? It's going to take you into the old part of the Bible, a book called Judges. Take you to chapter 6, and while you're doing that, let me just kind of give us some context. So we're going to drop into a slice of the life of a guy named Gideon. Now, Gideon was a Jewish or Israelite judge, and he was also a military leader. And when we drop into this part of history, we're going to discover that the Israelites had experienced the last 7 years of absolute havoc that had been wrought upon them by a nation of people called the Midianites from Midian and some of their allies. And they destroyed crops and they'd stolen livestock and literally just decimated so much of the Israel people and their livelihood and their economy. And despite the fact that Gideon was a military leader, when we first encounter Gideon, he was doing anything but driving the Midianites and their allies out of Israel. In fact, Gideon was laying low, literally hiding out of sight. And so then this happened. The angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." And I just wonder if in that moment, Gideon's looking around like, who's he talking to? Because he was anything but a mighty hero in that moment. But right out of the gate, as we get into today, as we launch this series, I want to remind you of the great news that God doesn't see us as we are. He sees us as we could be. He doesn't just focus on our reality today, particularly if it's us at our worst moment. No, he sees our potential tomorrow. And so after this angel appears to Gideon, God ultimately charges Gideon with the responsibility of getting out of hiding and leading the Israel army to drive the Midianites and their allies out of Israel. 7 years, it's time. So, to Gideon's credit, well, you can read some bits in between because he didn't sort of like rapidly say yes, but ultimately he said yes. And he gathered together 32,000 Israel soldiers, and they set out on this mission to drive the Midianites and their allies out of Israel. Now, I want you to remember that number, 32,000. That's the number of Israelite soldiers, 32,000. Now, is that a lot? Is that a little? Well, let me just give you some context. The Midian army and their allies numbered 120,000. So essentially, we've got a 1-to-4 ratio of Israelite soldiers to Midianite soldiers. Didn't look promising right from the outset. So Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Harod. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. Now, this word Harod in Hebrew literally translates to trembling or fear. So now we see Gideon, who wrestled with fear and caused him to go into hiding, lead his army to camp at the spring of fear. And look, chances are some of you know exactly what it's like to be camped out by the spring of fear. You even know what it's like to drink day in and day out from the spring of fear. And I don't need to remind you that it's a problem. Now, any scary movie people out there? Scary movie people? Look, I don't really understand you, but look, I respect it because I don't do scary movies. I'm not even sure I could do scary movies. I mean, reading the news in the morning is enough fear and trembling for me for one day. And I'm not going to dunk on you if you like scary movies. I just know that they're not good for me. They just don't leave me feeling well if I even get through them. So I just stay away from them. And I use this example just to sort of hint at the reality that sometimes the explanation, or at least in part, of why we continue to experience fear is because we allow ourselves to remain camped out by the spring of fear. And in identifying that, one of the first things we need to do is to change our environment. And when I say environment, I'm actually talking about quite a few moving parts. I'm talking about all the things that we allow to influence us. The people, sure, that's the pretty obvious one, but look, there's also like the TV shows, the podcasts, the social media accounts. Bundle all these things up together and ask the question, are these things indicative of me camping out alongside the spring of fear? Is this environment that these things create in and around my life feeding my faith or feeding my fear? So let's run some diagnostics. 3 questions around your environment. First of all, is it healthy for my head? What sort of thought patterns are these moving parts in my environment that comprise my environment? What sort of thought patterns are they creating? Is it healthy for my heart? Are these moving parts that have comprised my environment, are they causing more of the fruit of the Spirit to be demonstrated in my life? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, self-control. Or do I find myself being led to more negativity and cynicism and bitterness? And then, is it healthy for my hands? Is this environment leading me to create life-giving habits or life-destroying habits? Sometimes you need to change your environment. So the Lord said to Gideon, all right, you've got too many warriors with you. Remember, 32,000. That's the magic number that Gideon started with. And if I let all of you fight the Midianites, well, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. God was kind of there. He kind of, lent his finger on the scale a little bit, but we were pretty good. We were good. So therefore, tell the people, whoever is timid or afraid may leave the mountain and go home. So 22,000 of them went home, leaving only 10,000 who weren't afraid, who weren't dominated by fear, who weren't going to allow themselves to drink at the spring of fear. So here we go. Midian army, remember that magic number, 122,000. Now the Israelites are down to 10,000. So that ratio has gone from 1 to 4. Now it's 1 to 12. These odds are not moving in the direction that we would expect. But, God recognized that, first of all, if the Israelite army was as plentiful as it was at the beginning, they would be tempted to take the credit should they end up winning. And God also recognized that, and by the way, I think you probably know this already, fear is contagious. And sometimes one of the most powerful things you can do when you're wrestling with fear in your life is to take an honest look at the people in your life. And sometimes you need to break it off and send some people home. And look, you'll be reminded of this if you ever talk to somebody who's broken free from addiction. They will tell you that they had to change their environment, and a large part of that is they needed to break up with some of the enablers, some of the people that if they stayed with them and didn't send them home, would just draw them back into their addictive behaviors. We've got to intentionally create an environment which includes the right people that feeds our faith and not our fears. So, Israelite armies down to 10,000, Midianites still 122,000, but the Lord told Gideon, there's still too many. Wait, what? Bring them down to the spring, and I'll test them to determine who will go with you and who will not. Well, when Gideon took his warriors down to the water, the Lord told him, divide them into two groups. In one group, put all those people who cup water in their hands and lap it up with their tongues like dogs. And in the other group, put all those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream. Only 300 of the men drank with their hands. All the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream. Now, quick spoiler, that meant there's 300 that drank out of their hands, 9,700 that drank in the stream, and God sent the 9,700 home. Now, big brain scholars aren't really clear on the significance of the drink from the hand versus drink from the stream. Could have been, like they were like more attentive, eyes up, heads up, don't let your guard down. We don't know, okay? What's the more important thing is that this was a really God moment for Gideon. Like, okay, you took me out of hiding, wasn't on my plan, set me up with 32,000, whittled that down to 10,000, and now you've thinned the herd down to 300. Really? Ever had a really moment with God? Like praying for God to help you move forward financially, and then your hours get cut at work? Really? Praying for God to help you work through a challenging relational season, and just like your friends and family and support network don't kind of seem to be showing up for you, and you're like, really? Well, the Lord told Gideon, with these 300 men, I will rescue you, and I will give you victory over the Midianites. See, right here, God put his foot in on the accelerator and drove it home and said to Gideon, you are not alone in the battle. And I want you, if you struggle with fear, you're struggling with it right now, or you have a habit or some sort of track record of struggling with fear, we don't fight the battle by ourselves. God was saying to Gideon, 300 plus me is more powerful than 32,000 or even 122,000 without me. A reminder that sometimes God will allow the challenge we're facing to get so big and maybe even obscure the resources we have access to while we're facing that challenge, to get us to the place where we have to recognize that we can't do this, fight this, win this on our own. And that moment gives us the opportunity and the invitation to rely on God more than we ever could before. And then ultimately, when we get the victory that God promises us, God gets the glory. So landing this, and you can read between this bits of this plenty. I've had to jump forward to get to this point, but here's what happened next. This is bonkers. Gideon returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, "Get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes." Now, this actually hasn't happened yet, but Gideon took God's promise as good as done. Gideon divided the 300 men into 3 groups and gave each man a ram's horn, that would have functioned like a trumpet, and a clay jar with a torch in it, like a flame in it. And he said to them, "Keep your eyes on me. When I come to the edge of the camp, do as I do. And as soon as I and those who blow the ram's horns, blow your horns too, all around the entire camp, and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." And the 300 men moved and then stood exactly where Gideon had instructed them to do. But that's technically all they did in that moment. They stood. And if you struggle with fear, you know that sometimes standing is the only thing you can do. But here's the great thing. With God fighting with you and for you, sometimes just the act of standing, of not getting knocked down, of not retreating is the only thing you need to do. So each man stood at his position around the camp and watched as all the Midianites rushed around in a panic, shouting as they ran to escape. When the 300 Israelites blew their ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camp to fight against each other with their swords, and those who were not killed fled to places far away. As Jesus followers, when it comes to us fighting fear and positioning ourselves to where God can make a way where there maybe isn't a way, our weapons look different. You know, that Gideon spent all of this time talking with and listening to God. We have access to that communication avenue. This trumpet is like it's worship. Like one of the things that I do, if I'm ever having a dark day, a blue day, a down day, one of the things I do is I put on worship music. Maybe in the house, maybe I put my earbuds in and play from my phone and just head out to the garden or go for a walk. I play worship music to allow God's promises and God's Spirit to fill my thoughts and feed my faith when the enemy wants to feed my fear. And then they also took these torches, this light, and God's word is a light to our path, a light that shows us the way. And with these things, with access to and using these tools, these weapons of warfare that are exclusive to God's people, we position ourselves for victory where God can make a way where there isn't a way. So look, final thing from me is this QR code. Please scan this. If you've got the Bible app installed on your smartphone, it'll take you to the Bible app and it'll allow you to set up Elevate Church as what they call My Church in the Bible app. And at the beginning of each week, we load up a Bible reading plan based around the topic that we've taught on. And I read and I do those plans every week, and a growing number of our team and people all around the world are jumping on and doing those plans as a way through the week to position ourselves with God's word, a light to my path, to feed our faith. So scan that. It's free. It's powerful. And hopefully I'll see you in the Bible app, and hopefully also see you again right here next week for week 2 of our series, God Can Make a Way.